Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now, joining me as usual is David Morassutti. David, how you doing? Are you bemoaning the loss of Canada in their exhibition? They're friendly with Uruguay.
It's disappointing for sure. And what it does, in my opinion, it makes you kind of go back to reality a little bit and realizing that there are some very good countries in this World Cup.
And that's one of them.
That is one of them. And you know
13th
what?
overall.
They're a good team, but they're not the great teams that they're.
That they might have been. They might have been years ago. Absolutely. So, in case you're wondering why we're talking about that game, we are talking about football, and that is football, of course, a different kind of football. So, I always like to think of Canada and how we're doing in different things, and this is a sport where Canada has made a few leaps and a few bounds, and for me, it wasn't about disappointment; it was about reality. I think it was, what the kids say today, a reality check. That's what this game was for Canada.
Yeah, no, for sure. When this and it was a good thing that they set up this type of friendly right at this point, because when you're going into a group against Belgium and Croatia,
Croatia,
who
yeah,
have gone far in World Cups, yes, there is a reality check needed to realize that in order to move on, you got to be better than one of those two teams.
and you've probably got to be better than you've ever been.
Yes, right. And you're playing against competition that, frankly, you should be beating. Right. These are teams that are well below the level of those other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. All
So
right, let's get into the other football, the one we like. Not that we don't like the other kind, but just wanted to, tip of the hat to the Canadian team and wish them a lot of luck. As long as they're wearing the maple leaf, we got to pull for them. And I was disappointed didn't get to see the game, but that's another story for another day. Let's talk about the games that took place, and we'll talk on some stuff that's going on in the Canadian Football League right now, and we'll talk about Hamilton and Montreal, two teams that you know. This was a game, I think, David, which was for the playoffs. This game did a lot for Montreal, could have done a lot for Hamilton. Unfortunately for Hamilton, it didn't.
I said, you were big on them when they beat Winnipeg, and I said, let's see if they can now do this for a period of time. I'm pretty sure I said that. If I didn't say it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying it now. You can. We've known the CFL. You can win one game. The toughest thing to do in the CFL is to win a stretch of games, which is why everyone gives Winnipeg their due, because they won all those games in a row. Hamilton needs to start realizing, okay, we need to start establishing a pattern here that we can at least, because you're right, their margin for error is pretty much zilch.
It's getting down to zero.
Right? There's 4 games left. They are basically 4 points behind Saskatchewan for the crossover. A tie, now I will say this, a tie gives Hamilton the spot.
Absolutely.
They could just tie. But they have to also realize that Saskatchewan at some point is going to win a game.
Absolutely.
And
And like we said way back then, that both teams a couple of weeks ago said the same thing then. Hamilton has to win 2 more games than Saskatchewan if they want to get in the playoffs. As long as Saskatchewan keeps that 2-game lead or 1-game lead, they're fine. Or if there's a tie, the point being that Saskatchewan can't finish tied with Hamilton. So the opportunity for Hamilton to make a statement is coming up. This game against Montreal was critical, but it hasn't killed them yet because they're actually playing Saskatchewan. So if they can win that game, then it'll get interesting going into the very end of the season. But you know, a playoff game against Hamilton, for those of us that cover Toronto, we know how exciting that is for both cities. So that, as much as that's what I like about them making the playoffs, it's what's going to happen is what's going to happen. But Montreal has proven that they can play really well. You know, they beat Winnipeg, one of the only teams to beat Winnipeg. So we know they can play really well. And in this game, we know as well that Trevor Harris is the kind of player that has had experience playing in big games and has done really well in Montreal. He literally took the game away from Adams. It was an unfortunate injury for Adams, and then an opportunity for Harris. Harris stomped on the opportunity and literally took the job away from Adams. And I really think that Harris has, yes, a lot to prove. Harris, yes, has done a lot of what we talk about here in Toronto with McLeod Bethel Thompson, right? We talk about statistics. We talk about stuff that he's done. We talk about, the great runs he's had in, consecutive passes, how many passes he makes, how many yards he churns out offensively. But what we haven't seen from him is what we haven't seen from McLeod Bethel Thompson and many other quarterbacks who want to be known as great, and that is win a championship.
Right, and that's something that has eluded Trevor Harris his entire career, right? Remember him getting to that first Grey Cup with Ottawa and all the pretty much the storyline that entire week of that Grey Cup was Trevor Harris not being able to get the job done in the end, right?
Right.
And he's had to carry that for his whole CFL career. And right now, yeah, when we went into the season, there was a thought of it that he could be their quarterback this year because
Yep.
Vernon hadn't proved it that he could be, you know, um, he couldn't be a starting. He's proven he can be a starting quarterback, but just for Montreal, it just never seemed to be the right fit for either side. And so when he took over, I'm like, well, now we already know the East is the easier path to get to the Grey Cup when you look at the teams. So for Montreal, they win that for that first game, and I know they haven't officially clinched yet, but once they do, that first game they win that, it's anybody's. It's anybody's
Absolutely.
opportunity. And for Trevor Harris, the thing I think that people scoff at about Montreal being a contender, as I said, one game. That's all these teams focus on. They beat Winnipeg. They're the ones that put the chink in the armor. Of course, it took some luck. It took some missed field goals, but they got the job done against Winnipeg.
They
They
can win the big game.
they can't. I think that they. I'm still not sold on them yet, but they're a team that you give them the one game, they could be dangerous.
I have to agree with you, and how many times have you heard one game does not a career make, or one season does not a career make? Well, in the Canadian Football League, if you're a quarterback, one game can make a career. If you win a Grey Cup, it changes. It changes who you are in the minds of so many. One of the reasons why, and we'll talk a little later about it, or we can talk about it now and then talk about the other teams as they play, because I think it's important to mention as far as the quarterbacks are concerned. Bo Levi Mitchell's one of those people that won a Grey Cup, and it's hard if you're Calgary to walk away from him. I don't think they're going to trade him. I think they're going to keep him. For them to trade him, they will be taking a chance that many teams have seen happen, which is your number one quarterback goes down. Now, what do you do? Right now, if their number one quarterback, assuming Meyer is the number one quarterback, which I think is a fair assumption, if he goes down, who would you rather have? Their number three quarterback or Bo Levi Mitchell?
Well, and that's the big one. There is two things. You don't want the Bo Levi Mitchell era to end on a trade. Be very unfortunate if that's the way that it all ends in Calgary is through a trade. And yeah, Jake Mayer, he is their starting quarterback. No ifs, ands, or buts. I don't expect him to all of a sudden fall off a cliff in terms of his play, but injuries happen. We have seen it with quarterbacks constantly. You need to be rest assured in the guy that's your backup. So if I'm Calgary, it's an unfortunate situation. In some ways, it's uncomfortable, maybe, but the ultimate goal is to win. You have to put those things aside and just focus
Yeah.
on the task at hand. And Bo Levi Mitchell understands that.
Dickinson's a very experienced coach, and do we have to talk about the general manager? I mean, for goodness sake, Calgary, steady hands there. They understand the game. They've been around for more than a week. They understand what it takes to win a championship because they've done it a few times, and they'll do it again. That's just the natural course of things when you have that kind of organization. We just don't know when it's going to happen. But one of the things for sure is that they understand about quarterbacking. I don't think they'll trade him. I don't think there's anything any team, and this is the key, I think, in my mind. I don't think there's anything any team would be willing to give up that would attract Calgary into letting, letting BLM, Bo Levi Mitchell, go to that team. I don't think there's enough out there to attract, because again, I'm going to repeat it because I think it matters, and that is that he is, whether he's the backup quarterback or the starting quarterback, he's Bo Levi Mitchell. He's a Calgary Stampeder, like you said. And I don't think they'll trade him because I don't think it's a good idea. And I don't think they think it's a good idea to trade a number two quarterback that can be a number one. I mean, a real number one. If Bo Levi Mitchell for one game, you talked about one game, right? Who's to say Bo Levi Mitchell can't be the quarterback he was for one game? Or in this case, it'll be two games because Winnipeg's going to finish first, so it'll require a little bit of luck for Calgary, because I think you know Bo Levi Mitchell's just to me, I just can't see him not having a little bit left. That last kick, like a long distance runner has, right? I think he could do it, and I wouldn't trade him just because of that.
Honestly, too, because they were talking about who would you trade him to, and one of the teams that's come up is Saskatchewan. No offense, Calgary will believe that Jake Maier is the better quarterback, but are you going to leave it a chance that potentially, Saskatchewan? I mean, I don't see them right now. I think the crossover is pretty much their only route. If by chance Saskatchewan makes it to the Grey Cup and Bo Levi Mitchell's their quarterback and Calgary makes it to the Grey Cup, I mean, the CFL would love that storyline.
So would you and I.
We would love that storyline, but the Calgary would definitely not like that storyline, because there's one thing you don't want. It's a motivated. You give the team any reason to be extra motivated.
Can you imagine the phone call from Saskatchewan to Calgary? Bro, you don't need that quarterback. Send him over here to me. Maybe I'll help him have a good end to his career. Bro, a little brotherly phone call maybe gets made, and that's just the thing about the Canadian Football League. Quarterbacks are the quarterbacks. Maybe a little later we'll talk about some of the quarterbacking comments we had and the discussion we had in regards to quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League. I raised the issue that the quarterback pool of today is nothing like the quarterback pool of yesteryear. But anyway, let's talk about the game. Of course, Montreal beats Hamilton 23-16. Well value for that. And it goes back to Evans not having the kind of game that he needs to have.
Yeah, it's so true, right? It's kind of unfortunate, right? When you think about it, there's so much on the line in these games, and the perception too of what you're trying to accomplish at this point in the season, right? And sure, things look a little easier. Things seem to be. I understand maybe the pressure isn't totally there, because for a lot of these teams, the playoffs is already a lock. But we see teams kind of take they kind of lose their form. They lose their way a little bit. They let things get a little bit too lax. And the worst thing any team can do is try to figure out to flip the switch.
Hmm.
Because once you flip the switch off, it's very hard to flip it back on. And so I think you gotta these last few games, and this is why performances, it could be one game, and you can say, it's just one game. One game could then become 2 games, it could become 3 games. It's critical for a response after a performance like that, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
they don't have the time to do that, though, David. They've got to put a run together.
they do, but the thing is, do you really expect them to?
You know, I hate to say this because the problem is that Evans has not taken the reins and run with it. Whether forget the injuries. It's not about the injuries. It's about injuries are part of the game, David. They're part of the game. If a quarterback gets injured, that's a statistic that bears on his ability to be a quarterback. That's a reality. Quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League, I think, need to be um, not only elusive, but they need to be able to take a lot of hits because they're going to get a lot of hits. That's what happens, and the lesson that gets learned after a while is some teams and some quarterbacks part ways because you know look, and I don't want to throw dirt on a grave, but Mike Riley is not playing in the Canadian Football League not because his ability dried up. It's because he took such a pounding and a beating there was no point to playing anymore. He couldn't play anymore. His body just couldn't take it anymore. If he hadn't have been beaten like he had for the past few years, I think he might have lasted another year or two. But that's one of the challenges of being a Canadian Football League quarterback. You got to be able to take a lot of hits, and if you can't, it's going to become abundantly clear, on the short long term, if I can use that term, where it'll take a couple of years, but you can start to figure out whether a quarterback can handle the physical punishment, which if we can, we'll go to the next game and we'll talk about the Argos winning 45-15, because I want to segue to one of the reasons why I think the Toronto Argonauts like Macbeth. McLeod Bethel Thompson is a beast of a man. He's a big guy. And you know what? He seems to be able to take a lot of punishment. We've seen hits that he's taken, David, you and I, in the stands and on television, have seen hits that he's taken that would take out the odd quarterback in the Canadian Football League. Is that a fair statement?
No, I think that's pretty fair, especially because you've mentioned he's a guy that likes to stay in the pocket, doesn't like to move out of the pocket too much. And we saw another quarterback here later in his career who didn't have the mobility, and once he stayed in the pocket and didn't have the offensive line to protect him, Ricky Ray didn't last long in the CFL anymore because of that reason. So yeah, McLeod definitely likes to show that he's tough. You just hope that it's not going to be something that's going to be the detriment to him. I don't think it will be. I think he's someone that's gotten smarter with that, especially when it comes to his sliding, which was another issue that people have brought up about him. But that's just all part of the growth for him. I think is learning. You have to make the smart plays as the starting quarterback. You have to know when to hold on to the ball, know when to kind of protect yourself. I think he's doing a better job than he's done in the past, because in the past he took some rough hits, especially where he was a runner or even in the pocket. He didn't really know how to protect himself as well as I think he does now.
There's a song about that, isn't it? You got to know when to hold them, know
No,
when to fold them. You've got to know when to do that. And I talked to him yesterday, and I challenged him a little bit. I talked to him like the fans talk on Facebook and other places, and you see comments, and I wanted to test him, and I did. I'll tell you right now, folks. I like McLeod. I like him. I like him a lot. He's a very passionate guy when it comes to what he does. He's sometimes emotional to the point where you wonder if he can contain himself, because he tends to sometimes, you know, seem to let his emotion get the best of him. We've seen it over the years, David. We've seen it. Everybody's seen it. You know, the scene after losing the game against Hamilton last year, the last game of the year for them. We saw what happened there. But here's what I'm going to say, and I said it last week, and I'll say it again this week, because I think, the thing about McLeod is he has not been a number one quarterback, but he's been around for a long time. No matter where he's gone, a lot of people have given him the opportunity to lay his stake on being the number one quarterback. He's only done that for 2 seasons from the beginning of the year, last year and this year. That's it. That's the only stake to claim that he has as a number one quarterback pretty much anywhere. You know what I mean? So, there might be a learning curve there for being a starting quarterback, being the number one quarterback, having the responsibility of being the guy that will catch all the lightning, if you know what I mean. And I think that's part of the problem he had. I think he's growing into the position. We're seeing now that he's making throws that, we expected him to make if he was going to be a number one quarterback. Is he much better than he's been? I think he's been better than he's been. Maybe not much better, but I've noticed a difference. I don't know about you. And this 45 points, he doesn't deserve all the credit. Absolutely not. This was at least, they were saying 93% of the points were directly related to a turnover. So that tells you something about the Argo defense. But, you need a quarterback that scores for you. Defenses can score. I get that. But a quarterback that can move the ball in a positive direction is necessary for a winner, especially if you're intending on playing the big game.
Yeah. No, that's where I've talked to a lot of people, and they've asked me, what do I think of the Argos' chances? And I said, well, they got the good defense, they got the weapons on offense. It really will come down to the quarterback. It always does in the CFL. And some people have said they don't have faith in the quarterback for the Argos just because he hasn't done it. That's a fair assessment because he hasn't done it. But what he has shown the last few weeks is he's not going to be the reason they lose a game. He's
That's
starting to
very important.
he is starting that's a maturity. That's the maturity part of his game. And I think that, and you know, I've talked to Ryan Dinwiddie. We've talked to Ryan Dinwiddie throughout the year about this, and he feels like McLeod's at his best when he's not battling himself, when he's not trying to do too much. There's a play where that interception against Ottawa where he's trying to make a perfect play and not really realizing that there's a simpler play to be made, or if you're going to throw it to an Ottawa Red Blacks DB, don't throw it to Abdul Kane. I can't always forget how.
Kene, you're right. No, Kene's fine.
Kane. Don't throw it in his direction because he will see it and he will most likely pick it off. But he will make that mistake, and he's shown that he's not going to really make that mistake again. That's a big maturity, big growth in terms of maturity in his game. The question now becomes, can he do it when the pressure's at an all-time high? Because he's looked good, but he's looked good against a not-so-good Hamilton team, especially without Dane Evans at quarterback. And he's then against an Ottawa Red Blacks team that, frankly, in a lot of ways, I feel like has given up on this season. It looked like they were going to try to make a late push, and then I think they just haven't. They are. If it just feels like the Ottawa is stuck in like mud right now.
Here's 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 to that point very quickly. They lost their number one quarterback. They had a couple of breaks, bad ones. They've been a team that's not played well for a very long time, and they're carrying the weight of the world, and that's the way the season played out for them as far as I'm concerned. And that goes for the head coach. It went for the GM before this year. And now, it's just one of those things. It's something they have to, address as a team,
It is. No, it's something. If I'm the GM of Ottawa, I'm realizing, you know what, you've given Caleb Evans his time. maybe you need to go in a different direction there, unless you really feel Caleb Evans could be the guy. Um,
Well, let's not forget about Mazzoli, right? I mean, you
but
know,
here's the thing: you rely on Mazzoli.
well, like I said, after a while, you begin to, quarterbacks have to take a beating in the Canadian Football League, and Mazzoli, in fact, he had an injury out in open field, but, a self sustained injury, if you remember. So, the physical dependability of a quarterback is a lot more important in the Canadian Football League than probably, well, you know what? It's probably the same for every football. No, more in the Canadian Football League because they don't have the depth at quarterback that, let's say, the NFL has. You know what I mean? Like the NFL, they can find a quarterback. They won't be in the position that Hamilton was against the Argos when they put their third string quarterback in. And we all knew the game was, and that's a tough thing to say, that you can go into Hamilton and beat Hamilton, and you're Toronto. You've never done it before. But I had no doubt they were going to win that game. You know how I felt about it. I know how you felt about it. And so in this league, it is important how healthy a quarterback can stay in the Canadian Football League.
Health. There's certain quarterbacks like Bo Levi Mitchell was always the healthy guy, and then as soon as he started getting unhealthy, that's when things changed. Zach Collaros, he almost was out of the league because he couldn't stay healthy. Once he figured out a way to stay healthy, he was back again as the top quarterback in the league. Look at Nathan Rourke. This is an unlucky injury. Can he overcome this and prove that it was just a fluke injury and this isn't something that's going to be persistent throughout his career? And I'm trying to think of another quarterback that would be a good example. Like Dan Evans has battled through injuries, as you said, but I think it's so hard because injuries to quarterbacks can be very fluky. But if it's a constant issue, teams have to make a really tough call. I don't want to be the guy making. Personally, I don't want to be the guy making the call because I want to show a little bit of loyalty to a guy once in a while. Like personally, if I was the Argos GM at the time, I would not have traded Zach Collaros. I said that was going to be a mistake at the time. They should have traded one.
I couldn't agree with you more. I thought he was here for the long haul.
They should have traded another quarterback. The season was done. He likely would have been back. I mean, the trade did revive his career. It did, but it could have revived his career in Toronto if Toronto was patient. But Toronto, there was probably a bit of a directive also to lessen the salary being paid out as well.
Well, the balance of the cap, one contract can affect other contracts that you could sign. So that's a reality in the Canadian Football League. So the Argos defense was outstanding in this game. Ottawa, as much as I'd love to say that Ottawa has given up or that, I have to say that the one thing about the Argo defense is don't sleep on the Argo defense. That defense is amazing. It's an outstanding defense, and the more I see it, and I have friends of mine who aren't Argo fans who have messaged me and said, you know what, Frank, I think you do have a really good defense. So it's not a question of not seeing the forest for the trees. There are people that see the big picture and see the Argonauts and how they play and how their defense plays. And you said it right that if McLeod doesn't lose the game, they can win just on the defense. Now, for people who say, well, we should have a better quarterback because, it should be more the quarterback. Well, you know what? When the Argos won the Grey Cup in 2017, it wasn't Ricky Ray that really won the game. It was the defense that won the game. It was Ricky Ray that put the period at the end of the sentence. But the sentence was, you are now going to be beaten by the Toronto Argonaut defense, Calgary. That's what happened. And so, that's not to suggest – I know I'm being counterintuitive there. We're talking about how important quarterbacks are, and then I'm telling you how important the defense is. It all comes down to what David said, is that the quarterback first can't lose the game. Second, be there ready to make the big play that wins the game. That's what the quarterback is. It's they don't have to score 5 touchdowns, David. They just have to score a key one, a nice pass down the sideline, and the guy goes for a touchdown. And then your defense makes an interception. You win the Grey Cup. Yay, hooray. That's how the Grey Cup works. And then we talk about how great Ricky Ray is, which isn't hard. He's won 4, but you only have to win 1 to be great in the Canadian Football League because, it's a tough trophy to win.
You know what? It's funny because I always hear people say, "Oh, but it's only six. It's only how many teams in the
No,
CFL, right? Like 9 teams. How hard is it to win a Grey Cup?" And I'm like,
it's true.
Go ask Hamilton. Go ask Winnipeg.
It's true.
Go
How hard can it be? Go ask
ask,
Hamilton.
ask a lot of teams.
Ask
Ask
Winnipeg before they won their first 2 in a
right,
while.
ask Saskatchewan. Ask Edmonton. A lot of teams that have struggled to get there. It's not an easy trophy to when there's fewer teams. It just means that certain teams are able to sustain their success a little bit longer. Yes, there's not as much competition because there aren't
But
30
that's
teams.
the problem, David. That is the problem. If there's only 9 teams, you should be winning every other year. Right? So that's
Good.
the pressure. The pressure is what's your excuse for not winning the Grey? How do you be Hamilton and not win one in this century? How do you do that? How do you not win a Grey Cup in this century? We're almost a quarter way through, and you haven't won a Grey Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. And if you're a Hamilton fan, that's what you're saying. So it isn't harder, but perceptively, it is harder because the perception's so strong that you should be able to win it. There's only 9 teams. You said it all in that little word salad that you tossed out. Absolutely.
And that will continue to be something that when it comes to I mean a lot of these teams there's a special there's different ways you can win a great cup. The easiest way is if you have a good quarterback and a good defense. That's usually the case. But sometimes teams overlook one for the other. We'll have a really good quarterback, defense is okay, but then we won't give him an offensive line to protect him.
Hey, you're overlooking special teams too.
You know what? I am because you know what? I think some CFL teams have overlooked special teams. Let's not. Let's not hit ourselves.
I gotta say, this is why, imagine, any quarterback that hasn't won the Grey Cup that wins the Grey Cup, their reputation totally changes forever. Forever. It changes forever. And then what makes it so tough to win a Grey Cup is that when a quarterback wins a Grey Cup, you don't want to play against them if you're the other team and your quarterback hasn't won the Grey Cup. It's that because that's the monumental nature of football. And I think that is one of the most intimidating things to face is to face a quarterback that's won the Grey Cup. Because if he can, he will, which takes us back to Bo Levi Mitchell, which is why I was saying what I was saying about Bo Levi Mitchell. You wouldn't want to play against him in a big game because you'd have to be very careful he doesn't do what he's capable of doing. So it's a little tougher. So Toronto beats Ottawa 45-15. Macbeth looked good in that game, had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Still a great game for him. Let's talk about Calgary and British Columbia, BC. BC is a team in search of a quarterback. They're a team that they proved the point to all of us that they had Nathan Rourke. They were battling Winnipeg for first place, right? He gets hurt, and now they're fighting for their lives to finish second. Not worried about a playoff spot, but for finishing second. So they're the best example, David, of why a quarterback in the Canadian Football League is so important.
Oh, definitely. Like I thought with the way Nathan Rourke was playing and the way the BC was playing on defense too, this could be a team that could challenge Winnipeg for top spot in the West. I thought so. I really did think so. But then they lose Nathan Rourke. 3 games where they didn't look so hot after, and all that thought dissipated. Now Nathan Rourke is pushing to come back. He's still believing. I had some people say, "No way, he's coming back this season." And then I had some people say, don't overlook what Nathan Rourke is willing to do to get back on the field." I think it's pushing it. I think it's going to be really close. And this game against Calgary, that was tough. that was a tough one because they had a big battle the week before, and it in Calgary. I think this also comes down to coaching. They just know they just know how to make adjustments. They lost that game against BC the week before. Don't worry, we're gonna come back. We're gonna and not only beat them pretty good, and beat them. You talked about special teams. That played a little bit of a role. I mean, I think Peyton Logan, another great player for Calgary. He really makes a difference on that team. But I also just think BC, you think that they're turning the right corner, and then that's not a game you want.
They're in the same position other teams that don't have a number one quarterback that's won a Grey Cup. That's everybody except Winnipeg, because now Bo Levi's not in the mix now. So this is the thing. What Calgary showed us is what Calgary has shown us for years. Same coach, same GM. Their business, like they know what they're doing, and they get the most out of their players, and they have the ability, for next man up. We talked about. I said I teased the folks into listening to what we were talking about, as far as quarterbacks are concerned. We talked a little bit about it. We talked most of it that we talked about. In this game here, we're seeing a young quarterback in Jake Meyer who signs a 2-year extension. And oh, sorry, not Jake. Anyway, no, it wasn't. No, it was in Edmonton.
Oh, Taylor Cornelius.
Yeah, Taylor Cornelius signed a 2-year contract. Jake Meyer. Wait a minute. They signed him, didn't they?
Signed him too. Yeah.
Yeah, they signed him for 2. See, I was confusing the two there.
Last week. Taylor Cornelius was last week or 2 weeks ago. Jake Meyer was this week.
Yeah. Good. So they signed him, and they've made the decision that he's their quarterback of the future. I think they want to keep their quarterback of the past. So with those two together, I think they will be the quarterback tandem of today. And when I say today, I mean today's Grey Cup. I believe they'll be taking both of them to the Grey Cup if they make it there. They'll definitely take them into the playoffs. I don't think they'll trade them. They've got 1 week to make that decision, and I just don't see that coach and that GM trade Bo Levi Mitchell. I just don't see it.
It's funny that they had to issue a part as part of their press release to talk about Bo Levi Mitchell's future. It's such a touchy subject in Calgary because a lot of them are just like, "Whoa, like we're not insinuating here about Bo Levi Mitchell's future." I can't. You just can't trade. You just can't trade him because I'm of the belief that you just never know what's going to happen. They're still playing for something right now. They're still playing for home field for that first game.
That's
So
big.
it's not like they can sit Jake Mayer and be like, "Don't worry, we've clinched a playoff spot. We'll take." I mean, at some point they will rest him if they do get if they get home field or home field's out of reach. But man, like I just don't I don't know if this is just because people just know Bo Levi Mitchell and will want to see him playing. But did you watch the last game he played, guys? Like he was not very good. He was benched. When have we ever seen Bo Levi Mitchell benched? It was never a thing until this season. You're not picking up a quarterback who is playing well. You're hoping he can play well. And there's a little something to do with his contract, which is not a cheap contract.
No, and you know that Calgary will have to eat a lot of the contract, which means trading him. What good is it if they have to eat the contract anyway? That's why I don't think there's much that can be given by whatever team decides to go for him. Let's talk a little bit about the playoffs and the picture Won't get any clearer this week because there won't be any new teams, asserting themselves as playoff members. Not yet, anyway. Not this week.
Mhm.
At this point, the way the season looks, you've got Winnipeg that may have, we can argue about that, may have dropped to the crowd. They may not be as invincible as we might have thought they were before they played Montreal. Um, uh, so I think they're dropping to the pack a little bit. Unfortunately, BC is not the same team that started the season. So all of a sudden, what that means in the West, David, is those three teams. It's a pick 'em. I think. I think any of the three teams right now can win that division.
I no, I think so too. Winnipeg, you still give them the edge because you feel like the coaching staff will get them ready for that game. They have the home field that gives them another edge there too, and they have the bye. But yeah, I this like last year, it was no doubt that Winnipeg was going to do it because of how they played. This year, when they lost the game against Montreal, and I said it could happen. It opened the door, and to look as bad as they did against Hamilton in that game that they lost, that said something too. They had the bye week. So now it's like, okay, you're going up against Saskatchewan, who are fighting for their playoff lives. Fighting for their playoff lives. Their coach has said some things that has
That
gotten him in a little bit of trouble and has stirred up a little bit of noise there. That's a tough game for Winnipeg. And Winnipeg and don't forget, the last time these two teams played each other, Winnipeg kind of embarrassed Saskatchewan, if you not
they did
recall, right?
back to back.
So Saskatchewan is not going to just lay down easily here. And for Winnipeg, sure, you have things locked up right now, but Winnipeg is not a team that likes to just sit back and kind of let things come to them either.
Here's what I'm going to say about Saskatchewan right now. Until they can overcome all things that aren't football related, because I don't consider penalties football related. That has nothing to do with the game. That's you not playing the game. So everything not football related, which includes penalties, which includes stuff that goes on in the sideline, which includes stuff that goes on in the newspapers, which includes what's said on Facebook, which includes the question marks about their quarterback, which includes the biggest issue of all right now, the newest and freshest issue, is their head coach. In a moment of what I think was honesty, an article written about him by Three Down Nation. I guess he's trying to walk back what he said, at least the way it landed. He's trying to walk back. I don't blame him. I think in a moment of honesty, he told the truth. And Three Down Nation is an organization that lives and breathes on 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 clicks. It's important that people watch what they're doing. It's their trade, their stock and trade. And you and I can agree or disagree on the validity of what they do, the method which they use. But at the end of the day, there's nobody, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, there is no organization that's more dedicated to the game of the Canadian Football League specifically than Three Down Nation. So when they say something, and you're the head coach of the team that they're quoting, or at least paraphrasing, or at least, spinning what you say, you don't want to be there because that gets around everywhere.
No, no, you definitely don't. And it's just been a pylon in Saskatchewan with
Absolutely.
the Marino situation, with Cody Fajardo not being good and dealing with both physical and confidence issues this season. This is the type of season where jobs could be on the line. Well, should be on the line, and will likely be on the line. And I've always said that the storyline should never be the coach, the GM, or the owner when it comes to things that are said. All that should be on the field. I always say let your teams play on the field, do the talking. don't do the talking for them. And that's the tough part. That's what makes it tough, is that these little things, and mm, like, you just don't, you know that anything you said can be taken out of context. And what I don't like is, now I've seen players, coaches, and a lot of people, when things are taken out of context and certain people are the ones taking those things out of context, it makes them guarded in what they say. And that's not good. We need the honesty. We don't want them to, we want them to be able to, there's got to be a semblance of trust. And that's why he's saying it wasn't taken in the proper context, but he did say it. And he's not saying anything. And the thing is, he's not saying anything that he likely doesn't think.
Yeah, you can use fear to create discipline. But when discipline becomes fear, you got a problem. And right now, the Saskatchewan Roughriders have a problem with discipline, and that word can mean a lot of things. And unfortunately, under each one of those headings, we can talk about the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But here, if that's the bad news, here's the good news. There's the East Division and an opportunity to basically, apologize to everyone involved and actually do something at the end of the season. If they can play that game in the Eastern Division, whether it be Montreal or Toronto, it likely looks like Toronto will be the team with the bye. And you're going to play against Montreal. We know how tough a situation it is for a Western team to play a playoff game in the East. Historically, we've witnessed the problem with it. We understand it, but it'll be an opportunity for Saskatchewan if they can clear up all this negativity, which has been, a big part of who they are and what they are this year. It's not over for them. And the game then ends up being played in Saskatchewan. So this horrible year, if you're any other team than Saskatchewan, you got to be worried about them. If there's one horrible thing that every team's got to worry themselves about, is the game is in Saskatchewan. And as we get closer to that game, we're going to find out how well that Saskatchewan team can handle pressure.
Yeah, no, for sure. This has been a tough season for them, but if they make it and if they find a way to get in, they might be the most tested team in terms of everything that's been said about them, everything that they've gone through. Usually these are things that make a team bond a lot more. It hasn't happened yet for this team, but
For them.
it would be good for them if they went through a little bit of adversity. No team ever does bad if they don't have adversity. They
It's
don't go.
quite possible. The Argonauts started this year. We talked about this before. The Argonauts started the season like Saskatchewan. They're two peas in a pod, really.
Mhm.
And they played each other. There were two teams that discipline was an issue. Sideline antics was an issue. Um, you know, Media, questions about the team being able to handle being a professional football team were both called into question. The Argos built on that. Good for them. And Saskatchewan might be able to as well. And that'll be good for them and their fans. And it'll really make things interesting in the playoffs. That's for sure.
Well, that's it, right? It's going to make it very interesting when the playoffs come around, and they just have to make it. At this point, it's all survival mode for Saskatchewan. I think they'll be fine, but this game against Winnipeg will tell us a lot of things one way or the other.
The other question that'll be outstanding, and one that really matters, and that is, will Dickinson survive? Will it be him and his team recovering and finding their way? Or will it be an injection of a new voice in the locker room and at the sidelines to help guide the team to a different attitude? Those two questions will be asked, or those two options will have to be figured out by Saskatchewan, and it'll happen in the next week or two. I don't think they'll wait any longer than that if they're going to make a change, like some people are suggesting.
Yeah, no, I think you just have to. It's tough to be patient if you're Saskatchewan, because this is a team that the last few years looked like they were ready to take the mantle as the top team in the West, and it just has not happened for them.
Yeah, too bad for them. They've done a great job over the past couple of years. Dickinson has been awesome. We'll see if they can straighten things out. We'll see if Hamilton can straighten things out, make that Eastern playoff spot a real challenge for Saskatchewan. We know that Saskatchewan's making it for Hamilton. We'll see if they can do something. And of course, Ottawa with an outside shot at getting that position. All the best of luck to them and their fans. They really deserve a break like that. David, I give you the final word.
Thank you, and just enjoy the last few weeks of this last month of the season.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We took a little break for the Jewish holiday, so it's Wednesday today, but we'll get back to Mondays next week. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out spanglishworld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody.